Continuous improvement comes in lots of different flavors and styles. I'm Bella Engelbach, and I'm inviting you to journey with me to the edges of lean. Episode 126, Getting to the Root Causes of Your Limiting Beliefs with Jeeva Sam. When I was first working, one of the early lessons imparted to me was that whatever happened at home was not pertinent to my work life. That has been a difficult lesson for me to unlearn. It was one of many limiting beliefs that I wasn't even aware I was carrying into my lean and continuous improvement work. Jeeva Sam joined me at the Edges of Lean to share his insights into some of the limiting beliefs that hold us back and what we can do about them. Jeeva Sam, welcome to the Edges of Lean.
Thank you, Bella. Great to be here with you.
I'm excited to have this conversation with you today. Can you tell us about Jiva? Tell us about what you do and a little bit about how you got to do what it is that you do.
Okay. So I live in Canada. I lived in Canada since 1976. Our family moved here from India. And so I went straight to university, then I went to seminary, I got ordained and served as a pastor for over 35 years. I got married in the meantime. My wife, Sloan, and I just celebrated our 40th anniversary last August. Thank you. Yeah. And we have 3 married children and one adorable grandson who is almost 8 months old right now. And so we live in the Niagara region of Canada. And so, of course, when you're, as pastor, you're always involved in people's lives and a good diversity of people, all the way from people who are manual laborers to people who are CEOs and owners of major corporations and so on. And so I had good exposure to people along the way. And one of the things that happened that I wasn't really totally prepared for was people began to probe me about what are some spiritual resources that you can provide us so that we can be successful in what we do, in the marketplace, whether it was their own business or some startup, company or somebody who already had a very highly responsible position, as like a C-level executives, for example. And so when I first heard that kind of request, it threw me off a little bit because that was not what I was trained to do. But I began to realize that some of the things that prepared me, to be a pastor also had already prepared me, to come alongside some of these folks. And they were mostly men that asked me for their help. And so that's how I really got launched into consulting, into coming alongside as an advisor, a spiritual advisor to leaders. But in the meantime, my wife and I also, we felt a calling to work with couples who are at the point of giving up on their marriage and get them back on track through a rather unconventional way, not through traditional counseling therapy and all of those work. But we felt that there were some blockages, at the base of, who they were and in their marriage that needed to be addressed that a lot of conventional modalities were not addressing. And so then I discovered that those blockages were not just for married couples; they were also present in the guys that I was mentoring. So that's really how I got into it. Yeah.
Wow. So it's making me think about a situation that I've seen with clients, which is that, in engagement with a client, they decide that they are going to do something, say, with their career, change the direction of their career, go for promotion, or decide they're not going for the promotion, or, do something entirely different. And sometimes you do see somebody kind of get stuck. And then, then the question is, well, what about the rest of your family? Is the rest of your family on board with this? Have you talked to them about it? And then, as a coach, I feel a little bit nervous having that conversation because I'm not a marriage counselor and the spouse is not my client, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I've definitely seen that in my practice that when the relationship that the person has in their family, which sometimes, goes unaddressed in coaching, is really critical to being able to move forward or, to maybe move forward in a different way because that's what the family or the spouse needs.
Yeah, 100%, Bella, because it's really interesting because the way that I eventually decided to get into marriage mentorship actually began with mentoring these guys in the marketplace, who they were following everything that I was teaching them, solid biblical principles and getting really good results. But at a certain point, they started to get a wall, or a ceiling, where they couldn't go beyond, whether it was the 6 to 7 figures, 7 to 8 figures, whatever the case may be, or in terms of expansion, beyond where they were at and so on. And so that's when, I started to, again, spend some quiet time just, okay, what is going on here? Like, why are these guys not getting the breakthrough that I know they should be getting with what they're applying? And I heard very clearly this voice saying, ask them about their marriage. And so when I asked every one of them individually about their marriage, they all admitted, that there was some form of relational stress that they were carrying, lack of unity and harmony in the relationship. So sometimes these guys, they dreaded coming home, to a situation where there was tension. And so they became workaholics. They stayed out in the office. So they were doing good work. They weren't out there partying and stuff, but just avoiding, confronting, the relational stress. And one of the things I've been telling CEOs lately is, we have a lot of emphasis today on mental health, which is extremely important. If somebody's under stress, anxiety, depression, those kind of things, that'll definitely affect their productivity. But the silent culprit is often relational stress, which doesn't get addressed the same way that everything else does. And so one of the things I encourage them is, what, in addition to offering, like bringing in counselors, your EAP and all this kind of stuff, bring in someone, it doesn't have to be us, who will also, do two things. First of all, make your employees, and especially your leaders, aware of the relational stress that could be affecting their performance and productivity. But more importantly, just as we now freely talk about mental health issues, give them the freedom to talk about stuff that is happening on in their homes and families that they could use help with, and not somehow sweep that under the rug or think, well, if things are not really good at home, that might affect my chances of being promoted and so on. So make that like not quite as much of a taboo, but just let them have free flowing conversations.
Yeah. So that's really interesting, because I do think, as you are out there in public doing, a high level role in an organization, there is kind of a pressure and expectation to be perfect at everything, right?
Yes.
So, you're going to be super fit. You're going to be, everything's going to be great. Your kids are going to be perfect, and your relationships are all going to be perfect. And that puts a lot of special pressure on the spouse too, because when the spouse is, has to show up as that other half of the perfect couple.
Yeah.
But we're all human beings, right? We all have our little foibles and our blind spots. And, when you've been married as long as you have, 40 years, there's a lot of things you probably run into that can cause a lot of stress. So what you're saying is make it okay to talk about that stuff. And that requires then, Jiva, some vulnerability a lot of vulnerability, right? On the behalf of your clients. How do they respond to that?
Well, first of all, it's a bit of a revelation for them, because they've never thought about, even though many of them, like the higher level that somebody hits, they have experienced it on their own. But they, and so they've kind of chalked it up as part of the process and don't quite often empathize, with their leadership teams or with their employees, who might be going through. And unfortunately, the way that most of them discover relational stress has been impacting, their workforce is when something drastic happens. All of a sudden, a VP comes to you and says, listen, I got to take the next 3 weeks off and work on my marriage. Things are reaching ahead. And all of a sudden, like, it hits you like a ton of bricks. It's like, who's going to run this place? If my VP is not there for 3 weeks. But, at that point, you can't say no to your VP, because that on a certain level, the marriage is definitely way more important than what they do for your company. And so to me, it is preventative. It is being proactive. And so when they get the revelation, most of them don't still act on it because, it's not, well, we didn't put it in the budget, like that type of thing. It's like, no, make it part of your budget when you plan it next year, because, if you don't pay a small price now to make this a part of your culture, then down the road, somebody's going to pay a very big price. It's a little bit like, not taking care of an illness when it's at an early stage and then waiting till you have major surgery. And then, like it's way more stressful, way more expensive. So they're receptive to it, but still it's not an easy sell.
Well, yeah, I can imagine. And it can certainly sound like, well, it's on top of all the other things that we're being asked to do, right? Right. I
Yeah.
just want people to do the work, get the work done, get the product out the door, or whatever it is. And yet, we talk a lot about the importance of being able to bring our whole selves to work, right? That we shouldn't have to compartmentalize. For some people, I think that's a healthy thing to do, to have that some level of compartmentalization. But we shouldn't have to be a different person at work than we are at home. We should be able to be ourselves where we are.
Yeah.
And that means acknowledging that people are in relationships, and relationships have stresses.
Yeah. And that's really one of the aspects of integrity. When we talk about somebody having integrity, integer one, you're the same person, that you're at home everywhere. So you don't put on a persona here and then take it off and put another one. Your roles change, which unfortunately is another thing that sometimes happens, Bella, where somebody who's used to having everyone listen to what they say and do exactly what they're told goes home and tries their leadership style on their spouse and discovers that doesn't work around here.
Is that right?
Yeah. So there's that aspect as well. But as a rule, I think, the more aware we are of what makes us tick, what makes us behave the way that we do, why do we respond in certain situations the way that we do without even realizing that that's how we're responding. Like, these are the questions that need to be addressed, whether it's in the context of a relationship, marriage, whether it's in the context of success, in the business world, or any other venture for that matter.
So it's about doing some inner work then, and right, which is something that you don't learn in business school, right? That's
yes, yeah, and unfortunately, most of the fixes that businesses go for immediately are always the external. If we could bring a consultant and show us how we can be more efficient, show us how we can get more productivity, out of the little bit of time that the employees give us, or how can we restructure, our organizational chart to make it more, efficient, make it more lean, who can be cut out, like that type of thing. And so it's funny because one of the things that we emphasize in our marriage mentorship, and this is kind of a statement that people often find a little odd to come from a marriage mentor, because we tell them, you do not have any marriage problems, but you are two people with your own problems coupled together in a marriage, and together you've given birth to marriage problems.
Yeah.
In other words, you can come to me and you say, hey, we're having trouble talking to each other. We open up our mouth and it seems like we're getting into a fight right away. Can you help us, how to fight fair, or how to communicate properly? Well, I can pull out a few, worksheets and pull out some old communication manual and say, hey, this is what you got to learn to communicate. There's, this active listening, transparency, and this is a pattern that will resolve conflict every time. I can give them all of those resources, and they will apply them and get some results, but for a very limited period of time. Because after a while, because I used to have this happen when I was pastoring, I'd give them, the best resources I knew I had at the time. And they would call me back about 3 months later, or sometimes a little bit longer, and say, not working. I said, what do you mean not working? I gave you the best result, the best pattern. I taught you how to apply it. Well, we don't have the will to even look at it. Something came up. We got into such a bad fight. And it's like, so that's when I became more aware of the internal processes that are at work that can sabotage all these external, cures and solutions that we come up with. And so companies make the same mistake, people make the same mistake. I just have to go take a class on this particular aspect, whether it's communication, conflict resolution, mindset, all these kind of things. And there's nothing wrong with that. You need all of that. However, we have to recognize that the way that we are made as human beings, we have this whole physical aspect that's on the outside. The internal aspect, there's two to it. One that we call, the technical term I use is the word soul, and the soul encompasses your mind, your will, and your emotions. And then there's the spirit aspect of it, which is the communication that happens at the very deepest level, between you and the divine. We'll call God, the Holy Spirit, Jesus, whoever that may be for you. And so if you don't address these two that are not that visible on the outside, then what keeps on happening on the outside will not change.
Yeah. And that's that second piece of it, the spiritual piece of it, is very touchy in the workplace, right? That's we don't go there, for very good reasons in the workplace. But But to do the, sort of going back to what you were saying about the company wanting to be more efficient, right? If you want to be more efficient, yes, and this is what we do in, our lean practice all the time. Yes, you can improve the process, but if the leaders cannot change the way they lead, then you can put a good process in place and, 3 months later, it'll be gone, because the leaders need to lead in a very different way. And in order to lead in a different way, they have to start to behave in a different way. And in order to behave a different way, they have to start to think about how they're thinking.
Exactly.
And understand, in some cases, you were talking about, the guy who says, I tell people to do things so they could do it. To learn not to do that, but you learn to do that because there, as a friend of mine said, there are tapes playing in your head, really old tapes playing in your head, telling you how to do that. So to get to all of that, the things that you want in terms of efficiency, that inner work is absolutely required. And then, really thinking about then what does that mean for you in terms of your spiritual side as well? Because we're not just nerves and cells and hormones, a bag of hormones running around.
Exactly. Yeah. And the soul, which, of course, encompasses the mind. So the mind often is the battlefield, because as you just pointed out very rightly, ultimately your thoughts have to change, before your behavior can change, because, you act out what you think of and think about. And so one of the really interesting questions that everybody should ask is, where do my thoughts come from? And thoughts can be beliefs, but thoughts can also be based on experiences, that you went through. And a lot of times, that most people know this, but we don't always think about it in this context, is that a lot of things that happen in our childhood, influence us for life. Yeah. And so I think there's an old saying attributed, I think it's the Jesuits, who would say, like, give us a child until the age of 6 and we'll mold them for life, because that's how, influential and impactful that can be. And the thing is, most of us don't go through that stage of life actually, intentionally learning anything. It's really observing, absorbing things that are repeated over and over again that we take to be the norm, because that's all we know. And,
right.
and so those memories are still stored in your mind. So, like, you cannot erase them. You cannot push a button and click erase like you do on a computer. So those need to be addressed. And of course, when they're great memories, they will serve you very, very well. But when those memories are not of a positive nature, then they can crop up, and sometimes you don't even realize that you're acting out of those memories until you sit down with somebody who can help you to do that analyzing, or take you back, in your childhood, and think of some of those stories. Like for example, one of the most telling questions that we can ask somebody is, tell me about your mom and your dad. If you grew up with both, and when you start talking about, well, what are some words you would use to describe your father? What are some words you would use to describe your mother? Which of those words would you use to describe yourself? Light bulb. Yeah.
So how does that then differ from, because I'm always careful in my coaching practice, I'm not a therapist, right? I'm not trained in therapy. In coaching, I really try to, help people move forward rather than reflect on what's happened in the past. So how do you distinguish what you do from therapy, and how do you at any point send people to therapists?
We repeatedly send people to therapy when it gets to a place where we realize that the wounds are either really deep, or the wounds are from blows that were repeated, constantly. Whether it's verbal abuse, somebody heard the same way that they were called, whether it was unflattering name, or something even cruel. Unfortunately, like sometimes we hear the stories about what parents did and said to their children, and it's horrific. But to become aware of, like when these kind of wounds, when you're carrying these kind of wounds, what our emphasis really, and because we're not therapists either. I'm certainly have no training in that, not even much training in counseling. And I've always had, I've had some introductory exposure, to all these when I was going through seminary, and since then with continuing education projects and so on. But really, it is to make somebody even aware. Because, Bella, here's what, in the context of marriage, what often happens is husbands and wives will blame each other. It is, if only you hadn't done that, if only, and it's because of what you said, and so there's this whole thing about pointing the finger at the other one. And then now we need to help them recognize, listen, the reason why you're responding to what she said is because of something that's inside of you, that really brought that response out, because she could have said the same thing to somebody else who didn't have the same kind of childhood experience or belief system that you have, and they would have responded. They would not have seen anything, like anything malicious about what was being said. So it's the filter through which you are seeing things and processing things that is actually the issue. And so let's see, where that filter is. And again, a lot of times, people can figure that out themselves when they start connecting the dots. But when as I said, well, the wounds are deep and we know our limits. So at a certain point, it's like, okay, we've identified what it is. Now I can send you to a therapist and say, hey, here's what showed up. Can you take them deeper?
Yeah, yeah. So that very deep work they would do with somebody else. But that's so interesting that what you're really helping people do is to identify sort of like, well, I have a pain point, but what's causing that pain point? Now I know what it is.
Yeah.
I can go get some additional help to work on it, but rather than glossing over the whole thing. And I think what you're saying about that relationship in marriage, then you take that back into the workplace, because I think the same thing, in fact, I know the same thing happens in the workplace, right?
Yeah.
Somebody says something, an employee says something to a manager, or a manager says something to a VP or something, and it's interpreted in a way that was not the way it was intended. Yeah. But that person is bringing something to it, maybe because of their position or what they know or don't know, because of what happened at home that morning,
Yes.
So does developing that awareness in the marriage work, does that help people back in the workplace?
Oh, absolutely. I had a mentor once and tell me, which really totally caught me off guard. He said, when somebody says something to me and I get mad, I ask myself, what is wrong with me? Whereas most people will ask the question, wonder what's wrong with him to say that. And you try to psychoanalyze the other person, because he said, like, you can tell me anything you want. You can tell me the most horrible thing, but how I respond to it is based on me, like, because I'm the one responding to it. And so I've never forgotten that, and so that's one of the, like, becoming self-aware of what might be at work in you, that is provoking that kind of response from you. And so sometimes, just I'll give you like a very, very quick example where let's say that what you just said a while ago, something happened at work or at home rather, and you're taking it out on somebody at work. So you pause, give yourself a timeout, and you say, why did I respond that way? It's because of the way my teenager was lippy this morning before I left. Okay. So at that point, it's a simple matter of saying, you know what, I'm going to forgive my teenager for doing that. And so now, and I still have to deal with it. I still got to go home and discipline and stuff like that. But at this moment, I'm just going to forgive, my kid for doing that to me. Okay. That's not going to kind of orbit, in my cranium all day, where if anybody that does anything to me that might even border on subordination, then I just, like turn on them and smash them over the head with a rock. No, I won't do that. Simply because, it's not hanging over me anymore. So sometimes it's as simple as having that little bit of self-awareness of where that might have come from. Of course, like sometimes it goes back to childhood, so if it was your parent involved, yes, you still have to start by forgiving them, but there's a lot of hurt that's still in the soul area, your mind, your heart, your emotions, and so on. And so those are the things that you can do a fair bit of work on your own these days. But many people will still need to get some professional help when the wounds run deep.
Yeah, yeah, and you may not know where they come from. And again, it would takes that time and reflection and conversation with somebody else to bring that out.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And we all have so much history, and as my friend said, again, we have these tapes, and we don't always know what the tapes are telling us.
Yeah.
I often find when someone says, well, this is my belief, this is my personal position, that they don't necessarily know where that came from.
Right?
They haven't, and it's so illuminating when you stop and think about, well, where did that come from? Was that something my mother said to me? Was it something that that I learned in school? Was it a book I read? Something I heard, in church? Where did that come from?
Yeah. And now the good news is when you recognize some of those beliefs as really like not being positive or constructive, the good news is our mind is flexible enough and pliable enough that we can replace those unhealthy beliefs. And those will always be there, but you can push them down to the bottom, by pouring in, like an avalanche of positive beliefs of that counteract and that negative thing that always came up and made you, do stuff that maybe after, as soon as you do it, like, why did I do that? Okay. And now you're recognizing, okay, I acted out of that belief, but I can change that belief. And so that's the beauty of the way the God made the brain, is that we can now change our thinking. And now our behavior can also then shift because our thinking has shifted. And so that's why I believe like the power of affirmations, self-affirmations that you declare over yourself, can be very, very powerful because that's what they do. They pile enough good stuff on top of the bad stuff that is there. And now this comes out, like in terms of my Christian connotation, I tell them, you put some scripture verses in there that tell the truth about who you are and about life and about families and so on, and then what they will do is they will drown out the other voices so that you cannot erase the tapes. The tapes will still be there, but this new voice, that you put in there, this new tape that you put in there, all of a sudden, will overwhelm the other one, and so you barely hear that voice anymore. Or if you hear it, you have enough, wherewithal to recognize that is not the tape I should be listening to. That's not the voice that's going to guide me. This is what I choose to go by now.
Yeah. So going back to your example of the person who's in a bad mood because of the lippy teenager and, needing to forgive the teenager. If they have that belief that what the kid did this morning was unforgivable, they're not going to be able to do that. Right. But if they replace that belief with, yes, it is forgivable. I've committed things that have been forgiven and are forgivable. Therefore, I can forgive.
Yeah.
But that takes, as you said, that takes practice and building, sort of picking that belief apart and then rebuilding it with the good stuff.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. I mean, it's almost like sometimes people use the word reprogramming, which of course also has a negative connotation to it.
Sounds a bit culty. Yeah.
Yeah. Mind control and so on.
Yeah.
But essentially that's what you're doing. You're taking this old program that keeps on playing and you're replacing it with a new program. And Bella, one of the things that's very important in that respect that I've discovered is also who you hang around with, will either reinforce old beliefs or help you to grow in your new beliefs. And so the company you keep, has a huge influence. And so you need to surround yourself with the kind of people, who are uplifting, who, will not let you go down a negative, rabbit hole and keep on going even further down, until it becomes very difficult to pull yourself out of it. But people who will call you on what you're doing and say, hey, you sure you want to go there? How about we look at it this way? And so, and I may be talking about, having a really good friend, if you're blessed to have one like that, or it could be like a coworker or somebody in your workplace who's over you, or, like you need to have a coach, you need to have a mentor, you need to connect with an accountability group, a mastermind, wherever you have that kind of influence, to keep you, to stay above the fray. And not, get caught up in those kind of whirlpools when those thoughts come, because then before you know it, you're deep down.
Yeah. That is just one of the huge benefits of working with a coach, isn't it? That a good coach will ask you good questions to help you, help yourself question, is this what I'm doing? Is this direction I want to go? Is there something else I could be doing? That question, like, what else could you be doing? Is there another way to look at it? Those things are so important.
Yeah. And a good coach will ask you the questions that you may not even think of asking, or you may not want to ask yourself.
Yeah.
Because they're, I don't know if I want to go there or not, but you pay somebody to be your coach. Then they have the freedom to ask all those questions.
They have the license, right?
You give them permission to do that. Yeah. sometimes, I remember one mentor of mine, he said, so listen, when I see you doing something that needs to be corrected, should I keep it to myself because I don't want to hurt your feelings? Or should I take the chance that I might hurt your feelings, but help you move forward? No, go ahead, sir. Hurt my feelings.
Hold the mirror, please. I want to see.
Exactly. Yeah.
I want to see what's going on. Yeah. So you and your wife work together in the marriage mentorship.
Yes.
But when you're working with people in the business place, that's something that you do on your own. How does that work?
Yeah. So for the most part, I work on my own. Now, of course, like at this stage, I'm thinking to everyone that I'm working with, they're all married. And
interesting.
Yeah. So we've gotten to know them and their spouses as well. And so there are times when I've connected, in this case, the wife with my wife. And so they can have conversations. For a while, we actually had a couples mastermind, where we brought them together as couples and helped them deal with some relational stress, as well as, the stresses that people have that are work related and how it impacts the spouse. And sometimes giving them the wife to permission to tell her husband, honey, when you do this at work or when you stay out longer without telling me, like all this kind of stuff, I feel, like even to give them to say that, because sometimes they cannot say that, to them back at home, because somebody can blow it off. Well, that's just the way it is, or they can, not take it well, or they can react, in a way that is not helpful. And so that's a model that I would actually still like to pursue because, I belong to masterminds, and like in most cases, when I look at the masterminds that I belong to in the past and now, we don't go as couples. We just go on our own. And of course, these days, husbands and wives, can have very important leadership roles in their respective spheres. And so in certain instances, it doesn't make sense for you to be as a couple in your mastermind if it's very specific to your industry. But that is something that, we kind of did a pilot project with it for a while. And then all sorts of things, not that it wasn't going well. There were some other external factors in the lives of the couples, particularly, that prevented us from keeping on meeting that way. And so even now, I try to foster that relationship when necessary. She's my trump card that I can bring in. And sometimes she can say something to the guy that will actually land much better than me saying it to them. And so, so it does work that way, but not on a regular basis. I'm the one meeting with the guys and providing them with the mentorship that they need.
Oh, that's interesting. So have you ever had women clients?
I've had women clients, but only in a group setting. And so actually we had one woman, who was like very much into startups and so on. So when she contacted me, because I'd met her, through some other groups, then at that time, both Sloja and I actually mentored her together. And that's, again, to me, it made a lot more sense, and also for her comfort level, for her to be able to share some things that she might not feel comfortable sharing with me as a man, but when we're there as a couple, then she has the comfort level to bring up some of the stuff that she's going through, knowing that, like, here's a woman who understands my point of view, my perspective, and can even provide some very specific counsel. And so when those moments come, like, I don't even get involved. I just back out and say, okay, Sloja, why don't you have a call with her? And because I think there's something there that she, even in our mixed company, as well as this gal knows both of us, she still didn't want to do full disclosure. So, let's tell her, hey, it's going to be between you and her. You're not going to share anything with me except the gist of what happened. And so give them the freedom. So that way, and Slojan is respectful of that and also mindful, because she does not want to extend herself overly, like too much into, but at the same time, she knows that when I call upon her to provide that additional reinforcement that I need, and then she'll make herself available.
So, like you said, choose your trump card, and you can bring her in.
Exactly.
Well, that's wonderful for you. So, Jeeva Sam, how do people find you if they want to have a further conversation with you?
Okay, so I set up a website for this purpose alone called the VIPadvisor.com, advisor with an O, and so that's where you can go, and even you can even book a free consult with me. I'm glad to meet with you personally to see if there's something that I can share with you. And Bella, one of the things that I learned, there's a lot of sowing and reaping at work. So like the more you give, the more you will receive. That's the way I think God put things into place. And so I'm very glad to provide somebody with, some free counsel initially. And then, if they choose to pursue that with me, we can talk about those kind of arrangements. But a lot of times the initial clarity, is what they need, and to say, hey, this is where you need to go. And I'm very, very glad to do that because I know my limitations. I also know the areas in which I can come alongside somebody.
Well, thank you. So, and say the name one more time. VIPadvisor.com.
Yes, the VIPadvisor.com. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll have that in the show notes for people who want to look it up. So Jiva, tell me your one piece of advice for a young person starting out.
Okay. I think we really touched on it during the conversation.
Okay.
And that is, get yourself a coach or a mentor as early as you can. Don't wait till you run into a snag, run into a problem that you have to bring somebody else to clean up the mess. But make that part of your thinking process, that, yes, I have certain ideas. I have something maybe even that's very exclusive that nobody else has thought about. However, I don't have a 30,000-foot view. I'm so caught up in what I'm doing that I don't see my blind spots. So to have someone else there that I connect with, on a regular basis, it could be like just one person, or, you could belong to a mentoring group, like a mastermind, where a number of people, can look at you. They don't know your industry necessarily, but they see what is going on and can give you a perspective that you don't have. That outside perspective, it will actually save you a lot of trouble and bring you a lot of blessing if you do that right. So don't think of that as an expense. Think of it as an investment in yourself and in your business right off the bat.
Wow, great advice. Wow. Jeeva Sam, thank you so much for traveling with me to the edges of Lean.
Thank you very much, Bella, for the opportunity. Appreciate it very much.
This is Bella Engelbach, and I'd like to thank Jeeva Sam for being my guest at the edges of Lean. What did you learn from this conversation? What ideas did it spark? We would love to hear from you. Meet Jiva at thevipadvisor.com or find him on LinkedIn. Find me on LinkedIn or at leanforhumans.com. Or come and join me at the Lean Coaching Summit in Indianapolis in July 2024. And don't forget, comment wherever you watch or listen. Please subscribe and check out all my friends in the Lean Communicators community at leancommunicators.com, where you'll find lots of great new content every week. The Edges of Lean is written and produced by Bella Engelbach with support from Podcast Inc. This is the Lean for Humans production.